radar, and they say, yeah, we find a cavity there under the left paw of the Sphinx. So I'm going, okay, great, let's dig down there and find out what it is. To this very day, as far as I know, nobody's done this. They won't allow this. They will not allow us to get to the truth of the origins of humankind.
Exactly.
But Zawi Hawass, don't you believe, does know what's going on here, and he's smart enough to take account of all these this alternative research and remote viewing, and to try and get that information for himself? Do you think there's something going on there behind the background?
I personally suspect that somebody has already gotten in there. I just can't believe that everybody knows it's there and nobody will go look to see what it is. And but you have to understand that the Egyptian authorities, who pays their salaries?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
who do they owe allegiance to? Who has trained them? You know, we're back to the evil empire.
What about the coral, you know, the coral palace or whatever they call it down by Florida, where he proved that moving those stones was done by a whole different means than what they talked about with, you know, slave labor in Egypt and all of that.
Right.
They have a vested interest in perpetuating the myth of slave labor in Egypt, but in reality, that's not what happened.
Well, you know, Carrie, that's something that got me onto this a long time ago before I seriously studied ancient technology and ancient civilizations, was simply the fact that we are told that the pyramids were built by the slaves of the Egyptians who dragged these stones through the desert, you know, without any real modern wheels or anything else, and somehow built these huge edifices. Well, who were the slaves of the Egyptians? The Hebrews, okay? And who is one of the most well-documented peoples in the world? The Hebrews. They had oral traditions going down for thousands of years and then finally wrote it into the books of the Old Testament of the Bible. There it all is. And I defy you to go in there and find me one verse that says, oh, by the way, Uncle Herbie spent his whole life dragging stones through the desert, you know, to build those pyramids. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. There's something else going on. And why don't they want us to know about that? Well, over and above the fact that Egypt is totally dependent on the tourist dollar based on the Egyptian mythos, is the fact that this would tell us possibly of our extraterrestrial origins, and more importantly, it would point us in the way of alternative technology and energy sources.
Absolutely. We're talking about sound technology.
Right.
We're talking about, you know, I don't know, scalar waves. We're talking about mind over matter.
Exactly.
Which is, this is all stuff in the black projects.
Yeah. Sonic frequencies, who knows? Have you seen the hieroglyphs of the figure standing there holding the big tubes? Okay, and there's a cord that runs out behind it and goes to the little power thing. You know, they call it the Jedi, the tower, or I call it the oscillator. Okay, when I saw those, if you go up and look real close, unlike the rest of the caricatures on the hieroglyphics of figures, where they just have the outline of the person cut into the stone, this has a double outline to it. And we were remarking on that and wondering what does that mean? And I'm thinking, being a cartoonist among other things, is that when you want to show movement, you draw extra lines. You know, if you draw a hand and you got some lines here that's like the hand's movement. So by drawing a double outline, they're showing that they're going, they're actually using this equipment.
Right.
See? This is very carefully, it's just a second outline. Okay, it's not like they try to do something else, but there's a lot of interesting things over there. Some of the temples have been defaced by Knights Templar Maltese crosses carved in over the hieroglyphics. And of course, see, we're talking about stuff that's handed down for thousands of years and has been debased and defaced and vandalized by, you know, everybody and anybody, and so we're just scratching around in these ruins and trying to piece together what actually happened. I guess the corollary would be, you know, 5,000 years from now, they'll find a Coke bottle buried in the dirt somewhere, and they're going to be whole scientific papers written about you know, I wonder what this was about. Obviously, since it's in the female form, it must be some kind of fertility goddess icon, you know, that they worship. You know, this is we're just making this stuff up because we don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do we go from here? I mean, you know, you covered the gamut, and this is an amazing overview of an interview and that you've given us. And I don't even know, I mean, you clearly show us how you can go from Egypt to the Nazis to the American government, and you can draw a through line from one to the other.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an amazing thing. So what is your solution at this point? Because I see that you can actually foresee that we could change the world into
Sure.
such a place
Sure.
where we could have, you know, energy, access to free energy, access to living, keeping all the people alive on the planet and having them fed, clothed, you know, housed. So, I mean, we're not doing it, but this is
Why not?
a big step.
Why not?
in the
Why
right
aren't
direction.
we doing it?
That's,
You know why? Because we sit back and we let criminals and Nazis gain
Exactly.
control over the corporations and over the government that's supposed to be looking out for us and taking care of us. And hey, there's more of us than there are of them. Just say no.
I think there's
Throw the bums out.
also the myth of freedom, because if people start to realize, and I think certainly they are realizing, and this is the danger of this economic downturn that's hitting America, is that Americans are going to realize they're not so free, okay? That they've been programmed by the media, by this, by that, and they're also curtailed by their government, and probably these limitations are coming down even harder and faster. So if you realize you're not free, that's the beginning of waking up.
That's right. And if you think you're free, just ask yourself, can you just pick up and move? Can you just pick up and go move to another state or move to another country? And chances are you're going to go, oh, no, I can't do that. Why? Because, well, I'd lose my job and I couldn't make my payments and I couldn't make my mortgage and I couldn't pay my rent. And you're not free. You're not free. You don't even have any idea what freedom is. So, you know, we've got to get back to the idea of freedom. And this economic turn down or even collapse may end up being a really good thing. Because
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people who, you know, they've been taught to keep their nose to the grindstone and be loyal to their company and work and put in a good hours of work for your boss and that you'll be taken care of. And now they're finding out that, no, it doesn't work that way. You know, you'll work your tail off until you're 64, and then a year before your retirement, they're going to let you go, downsize you so they don't have to pay you that retirement. And this is happening more and more often, and people are beginning to realize
And they're doing away
this.
with your savings and your Social
And your savings are going away. Your 401 is, you know, it's down 40% or well.
And retirement's
more.
no good for anybody anyway.
No, there's no retirement. There's no money in Social Security, you know. And everybody says, yeah, well, I've got these insurance policies. Yeah, big deal. What if the insurance company goes broke? What have you got? You got a piece of paper. That's all you got. So, number one, start acquiring tangible assets. Get a little property you own yourself. Get something you can grow tomatoes on. Get a home. Get a building. Get something you can actually have some tangible assets, and then start working, doing things that you enjoy doing. This is so cool. I know so many people who, for years, worked for the company, and then the company just cut them loose, and they've found out what good that does and what loyalty does for you. And so then, in desperation, they run around and they try to find another corporate job, and that gets tough, and particularly the older you get, the tougher it gets. So then, all of a sudden, they finally have to, out of desperation, they start thinking for themselves, and they go, well, you know, what do I like to do? Well, I like to grow flowers, you know. So next thing you know, they're growing flowers, and they're cutting flowers, and they started their own little flower delivery business, and the first thing you know, they're doing pretty good, and they're making a living, and they're getting along, and they're getting rich, but they're surviving, they're doing just fine, and they're doing what they love to do. And that's
a real key.
That's a real key thing,
Yeah,
and really,
absolutely.
really important. And then, as times get tough, if we just all start networking and working together as a community, you know, you grow some chickens, and I'll swap you my tomatoes for your eggs, and we'll all just get along.
That's true.
Years ago, I had kinfolks down in East Texas, and they were just scraping out, living there in the dirt, red dirt in East Texas. And I remember asking them when I was a kid, I said, how'd you guys get along during the Depression, you know? And they just laughed. They said, hey, what Depression? I said, we didn't have anything to begin with. We didn't have anything during the Depression. We just kept doing what we were doing, and we got on through. And we're all going to get on through. And we're all going to do, actually, we're all going to do good. In fact, we might even end up